Thank you to everyone who watched, participated, to the thousands of people who sent us emails, and it literally was thousands of people. Thank you to my executive producer, the wonderful Lucy Boyd, and our team for putting together what I thought was a great hour of telly. Nice to see the alternative Prime Minister, Peter Dutton, sitting here taking questions, but also in an environment where he could explain himself. Now, you can like it, you can dislike it, vote for it, not vote for it. Free country. But it's nice not to see the interjections, the yelling, the carrying on. He had a chance to explain himself and talk quite decently about some pretty serious issues, including experiences that he'd had as a police officer when it came to trying to save people from family violence, and lighter moments like telling stories about his mum and dad popping over to New South Wales to play the pokies on family holidays. Tonight, I will keep my comments a little briefer than I normally do because I want to get to Bronwyn Bishop. I want Bronwyn Bishop to have a big, hard run at things tonight. Linda Scott is here as well. I look forward to that. Fight night on this Wednesday night. Tomorrow night is when we will do our final state of the race. That will be with Redbridge, with Michael Kroger and with Stephen Conroy. So yes, the footy will be on, but I'm not going to hide. Make sure you are here tomorrow night, or series link it, record it, do all the things you have to be, because tomorrow night, data, no one will be surprised. But tonight, you don't have to go too far to find awesome people like the wonderful Megan Kelly. The only place you see her on Aussie TV, right here.
Gail King, who went on that vanity project called the Blue Origin flight, that you're not allowed to criticize her unless you've been. Have you been? Have you? Let's just say, I've been.
All right. Now, before I get into the data, and there's lots of it today, including some fascinating stuff about what I've been talking about for years now, which is preferences and how they can swing elections. But while people are voting early, and again, vote tomorrow. If you know which way you're going to go and vote tomorrow. It's all counted on the same day. You don't have to wait a few days for your vote to be counted, okay? And we know that there is this tectonic battle for the future of our country for the next 3 years between the bloke who's been running it for the past 3 or the bloke who wants to run it for the next 3. But we all know that there is one thing that the media loves almost more than the horse race. It's the data behind the horse race.
Polls.
And tonight, I can reveal to you what another organisation has been reporting. So I'm not revealing, I'm just pumping it up here. You know the Turnbull Times, the Guardian? Now, of course, the only reason it exists in Australia is because the former Prime Minister, well, he helped to get it up off the ground here. He refers to it as, the sensible centre. We all know it's the wild left. Well, he may be regretting the decision, because the one thing Australians can agree on is how bad Malcolm Turnbull was as a Prime Minister. In fact, they did a poll in amongst all of their other election polling, and it had a look at all of the former Prime Ministers. And guess who came stone motherless last? The miserable ghost himself. He is dead last in a list of our best former Prime Ministers. The order goes, as you can see, John Howard first, Bob Hawke second, Kevin Rudd third, Julia Gillard fourth, Anthony Albanese fifth, Tony Abbott sixth, followed by Morrison, Keating, Whitlam, Fraser and dead motherless last. How good that the one thing we can all agree on, regardless of which way we are going to be voting left, right or centre at this election, is Malcolm Turnbull was the worst Prime Minister of recent years. The miserable ghost. Of course, it doesn't stop the Turnbull Times constantly turning to him for interviews, or him angry tweeting, or him even having the balls to refer to how boring this election is. Remember, it was his decision to have an 8-week election campaign. One where he took a 90-seat majority and barely held on to majority government. The bloke who was so sooky, remember, he wouldn't even leave the Pink House on election night. But also another thing that we learned via these polls, and again, not a right-wing think tank, they're published in The Guardian, is that Greens voters are miserable. I'm not making that up, I'm just going off the evidence. They went by party affiliation and they asked about how happy are you with your life overall. Coalition voters, happiest of all, followed by Labor and then the Greens, who are miserable about their life compared to the other major parties. That's their life overall. in their family life. Look at this. Look how happy a Liberal or National Party voter is. Compare that to the Labor Party or those miserable Greens. And you know how they're the young cool kids? Well, guess who has the worst social life? The Greens. The best social life, the best life overall, the best personal life and their best family life. This is in The Guardian. Coalition voters. And of course, we know that the Greens voters are so miserable because they think the planet's about to explode at any one moment and they have to pretend that they like Adam Bant DJing. Yeah, he's so cool. I don't care how many social media influencers he has. Who would want to listen to that? 3 days to go. Australia is at a fork in the road. We are presented with one each and every 3 years, and there are just 3 days to go. According to the AEC, there have been 4.6 million people who have already voted. Now, this is really interesting because a lot of people thought that half of all people would end up voting early. That's what the trends seem to suggest. But of course, 18 million people are on the electoral roll. Basically 5 million today. Let's imagine it's another million tomorrow. That takes us to 6, and then it gets us to maybe 7 million people before election day. Well, of course, that means that 11 million people will choose to vote on Saturday. That means what is happening in the final days matters. The final ads, they start to turn off after midnight. But the social media ramp up and there'll be other ways, but still the final days matter. Just like they did in 2019, just as they did in elections past. But the final days matter very much so here in 2025. Of the different places around the country, it's actually, surprisingly, mostly safe seats that seem to be voting early. Why? Because many people in those safe seats, you would imagine, are just happy to lock in who they've voted for a long time. Interesting that the number one location right now, a lot of these are in Queensland. And you see, habit-wise, there were some seats in the Queensland election where it was up to 70% of people who voted early. So Queensland likes to get it done early. In Bowman, which is the Liberal Nationals, then the Greens seat, which is highly contestable here, with both the Coalition and Labor thinking they might be able to pull it back from the Greens. Dawson, pretty safe seat for the Liberal National Party, the same for Fadden. Werriwa, now again, when things were better in the polls, this was considered to be a tight seat. The Labor Party think that the polls are going to pull it back into their column, but the preferences of One Nation might be putting this one back on the line. Flinders in Victoria, Dawson in Queensland, Macon in South Australia, Capricornia in Queensland, and the Labor-held seat of Gorton in Victoria are the places where people are voting early. Now, I have long talked about how I understand that there are many Australians who are frustrated with the two parties of government. They'll be frustrated with the Labor Party for obvious reasons. They'll be frustrated with the Liberal Party for a whole bunch of reasons, which means your preferences matter. And for your vote to be a serious vote, for your vote to count, for your vote to actually reaffirm or change the government, I believe that you need to pick a government with the vote that you put at number 2. Now, we know that traditionally most people who vote for the Greens will end up putting the Labor Party at number 2, in many ways because their how to vote forms will tell them to do so. And in 2022, people who voted for One Nation, the Palmer Party, Libertarian and lots of others, they did not give that number 2 to the Liberal Party the way they did in 2019. The way they did in 2019 was part of the story behind the surprise election victory of Scott Morrison, the one that we all saw coming, that we knew was happening. But is this about to be something potentially that will make things a little more competitive than they may well seem? Now, virtually every national poll right now is sitting somewhere at 52-48 or 53-47 in favour of Labor. But the X factor does seem to be One Nation. I'm pleased other people are starting to notice, but we have been on this, well, for years, but we've certainly been consistent about this for months, because the polls have told us that One Nation's support at the last federal election was 5%. But in the poll released by The Guardian, it's almost double. News poll, the gold standard, again shows that it is outside of margin of error in terms of its growth. Even Resolve and the Wild poll of Morgan all show a significant increase in the primary vote of One Nation. Now, of course, that is a national figure.